Hi, friends. Hope you had a great weekend. Absolute bombshell business news story for you today that we just absolutely have to talk about. We've all seen the ads on Facebook, on Instagram, all those scammy things. You know they're scams, and you're wondering, like, why the heck does Meta Platforms keep advertising scams to me? Don't they know that these are scams? Any person would know that this is a scam. According to a new Reuters report that just came out a few days ago, they make 10% of their revenue. At least they projected internally that they would make 10% of their revenue from scam ads. Not 10% of their advertising revenue, by the way, 10% of the income of Meta. And this is just the tip of the iceberg here, I'm telling you. So let's see if we can get a video out about this article and all of these revelations before CoffeeZilla inevitably does, because the scale of this is insane. So I'm going to take you through this whole article here and see if we can digest it together. If you're new here, I'm Josh, a former finance pro teaching you about money for free. Let's get into it. Yeah, so as you're going to see here, it's not even just that 10% of their entire revenue in 2024 came from scams and fraudulent ads and stuff like that. Like, that's huge, but also the extent to which Meta was aware that this was happening and actively profiting from it is mind-boggling. Like, it's absolutely insane. So we're going to go through a bunch of specific examples here because this Reuters thing is in fact very, very thorough. They give examples. They talk about all of these different internal documents that show the extent of the problem, how much they were aware of it, and how little they were doing about it, mostly because they didn't want to stop making an enormous amount of money from these scams to the tune of billions and billions of dollars. Like, I think it's like $7 billion per year that they were making from these scams. So yes, they could have done something about it, and you will even see some of their thought process behind like why they intentionally didn't do anything about it and are still doing, honestly, really not enough. Like, their lofty goals for doing more in the future are laughable. They are so bad. So I don't think anyone's going to be surprised to hear that Meta is, perhaps not a very moral company. You know what? Instead of me listing all the things that they've done in the past that have been, somehow morally heinous, why don't we just put those in the comments? Just comment your favorite thing that Meta has done, or maybe least favorite thing that Meta has done that has been somehow morally heinous in the past in service of their own profits, because there's a lot to choose from. Good. Okay, let's get into the article. So first of all, I guess this article is by Reuters. They were the ones who somehow obtained some internal documents. They actually don't say how they got these documents, but Meta has not denied that any of it is legitimate. In fact, they've honestly kind of legitimized it by responding to the claims, and they show some of these documents too. They're clearly like, all of this is real. All of this is actually happening, and Reuters somehow got a hold of these internal documents and did a bunch of research on them to then compile us this nice article. And if you don't know who Reuters is, they're a very reputable sort of business and finance news outlet. So they report on things like the stock market and macroeconomics and all that kind of stuff. They're one of the most reputable business and finance news outlets out there. Not sponsored, obviously. No one sponsors this channel. So please do subscribe. It is all about you. It is seriously all about people subscribing and watching these videos. That is my whole business model here. So let's get into the article. Meta is earning a fortune, seriously a fortune, like a seriously insane amount of money, on a deluge of fraudulent ads, documents show. Meta projected that 10% of its 2024 revenue would come from ads for scams and banned goods, documents seen by Reuters show. And the social media giant internally estimates that its platform will show users 15 billion scam ads every single day. Among its how many people use Instagram? Let's see. This is Meta in total. So at least according to this AI summary here, Meta Platforms has over 3.48 billion monthly active users worldwide as of 2025. So 3.4 billion users, that's almost half of humanity. That's quite a lot. But for them to be showing 15 billion scam ads per day to just like under 4 billion people, that's like almost 4 scam ads per day per total users. And obviously not every user is using Facebook, Instagram, whatever, every single day. So we're talking about like active users of Instagram, Facebook, whatever, seeing like probably like 5 to 10, maybe even more scam ads every single day. Some of these numbers that we're going to talk about later might make sense based on that, because the numbers are crazy for this. Like the amount of money that they are making on these scam ads is preposterous, but it does make sense given how many of these scam ads they're actually showing and some of the mechanisms that they're starting to use to make even more money off of the scam ads that we'll show later. And what I'm talking about here is, as it says in the next sentence, among Meta's responses to these suspected rogue marketers is charging them a premium for ads. So they know that these scam ads are scams, and then they just charge them more to put ads on their platforms. And issuing reports on the scammiest scammers. That's not Meta itself. That's an employee at Meta, apparently, who should definitely be praised for that work. That's cool of them, because I assume that they were probably at least a little bit worried about their superiors not liking the fact that they were issuing reports on the scammiest scammers on their platforms. But someone needs to. We have 3 scam ads here that Reuters actually found on Meta platforms as examples of these scammy ads. So it's basically, it's just every kind of scam that you can possibly imagine. This one is even like, oh, were you the victim of a scam? Call this law agency or whatever. And then obviously they're going to like try to get your money back, but actually they're going to scam you in the process, which is just a really ingeniously evil plot. So here we get into sort of the headline issue, which is that Meta internally projected last year that it would earn about 10% of its overall annual revenue, or $16 billion, from running advertising for scams and banned goods, internal company documents show. So that is a lot of money. And I don't want you to misread this, because I misread it the first time. I thought that this was 10% of their ads revenue, or maybe 10% of Facebook's revenue or something like that. But no, this is Meta Platforms, the entire $1.6 trillion company. This is 10% of all of their revenue, not just ads revenue, but 10% of all of Meta's revenue comes from ads for scams. That is freaking crazy. And $16 billion, that is more than the market cap of a lot of large household name types of companies. So $16 billion of revenue coming from ads that are promoting scams, fraudulent things, illegal things like, unlicensed casinos and things like that. Not great. And what is happening to that $16 billion? What is happening to all this profit? Obviously, it's not going to the victims of the frauds. It is just being kept by Meta, which is a huge problem that we can maybe keep in the back of our heads as we see some of the other stuff that is going on here, because that would be one solution. You could say, oh, okay, well, we can't really police every single ad that's on our platforms. We can't really specifically vet every single case. But when we find out that something was a scam, we take the money that advertiser gave us and we give it to the victims of that scam. That would sort of at least kind of make people whole. But no, they don't do that. They just keep the money for themselves and say, oh, you got scammed from an ad on our platform that we were already pretty sure was a scam, but we didn't do anything about. No, that sucks for you, but we're going to keep the profit from that. We're going to keep our $16 billion of profit from that while people get scammed on our platforms. And there's some shocking statistics. There are some seriously shocking statistics later in here. The extent to which Meta platforms, all of the platforms underneath their umbrella, are just absolutely a cornerstone of the global scam industry. It's unfathomable, and they know it, and they're doing very, very little about it. Their lofty goals about how they're going to improve their platforms are pathetic, and we will get to them in a second. So let's get through this article, because there's so much to talk about. So this article says a cache of previously unreported documents reviewed by Reuters also shows that the social media giant for at least 3 years failed to identify and stop an avalanche of ads that exposed Facebook, Instagram, and WhatsApp's billions of users. Upwards of 3 billion users on all these platforms is kind of crazy. Huge monopoly, and we could get into that too, but we probably won't. That exposed all of these users to fraudulent e-commerce and investment schemes, illegal online casinos, and the sale of banned medical products. On average, one December 2024 document notes the company shows its platform's users an estimated 15 billion higher risk scam advertisements, those that show clear signs of being fraudulent, every day. Meta earns about $7 billion in annualized revenue from this category of scam ads each year, another late 2024 document states. So these are ads showing clear signs of being a scam, according to Meta, as we will see later, and they are getting $7 billion of annualized revenue per year from these ads that they know are frauds. Again, where does that money go? They keep it. They just keep it. And it gets worse. Let's go on here. Much of the fraud came from marketers acting suspiciously enough to be flagged by Meta's internal warning systems, but the company only bans advertisers if its automated systems predict that the marketers are at least 95% certain to be committing fraud. How do we feel about that, folks? They could be 90% certain that something is a scam and they will still show it to you. They could be 94% that it's a scam and they will still show it to you. Imagine having something that was 50-50. This is a scam. Like 50-50 chance that this is a scam and then showing it to people. That would be pretty bad, right? 50-50 shot that someone's going to get scammed by this ad, but let's run it anyway. But they're doing 95%. They are 95% sure that these are scams, and there's, 94%. Sorry, 95 is too much. 94% certain that this thing is a scam, and they're still showing it to people. That's insane. It should be the other way around. It should be, we're 5% likely that this is a scam. That's not quite enough to remove it from the platform. Maybe it's not a scam, so let's just show that to people anyway. Anything above that, it's just a little risky. Our users might get scammed. But no, it's the inverse of that. It is the inverse of that. 95% chance that our users are going to get scammed by this, and we're still going to show it. 94.9% chance that this is a scam, and we're still going to show it to our users. That's enough, because, there's at least a 5% chance that this isn't a scam, so, we don't want to hurt our bottom line. But is this all about their bottom line? Let's keep reading and find out. The documents even further note that users who click on the scam ads are likely to see more of them because Meta's ad personalization system makes that the case. So basically, if you fall victim to one scam, Meta says, they will like ads like this, and then it will show them more ads like that. So if you're someone who gets scammed on Facebook once, you're more likely to get scammed on Facebook a second time because it's going to show you more scam ads. So here they tell us where the documents are from. They're from Meta's confidential self-appraisal. So I'm not sure how they got these documents again. The details of Meta's confidential self-appraisal are drawn from documents created between 2021 and this year across Meta's finance, lobbying, engineering, and safety divisions. Together, they reflect Meta's efforts to quantify the scale of abuse on its platforms, and boy did they, and the company's hesitancy to crack down in ways that could harm its business interests. Meta's acceptance of revenue from sources it suspects are committing fraud highlights the lack of regulatory oversight of the advertising industry, said Sandeep Abraham, a fraud examiner and a former Meta safety investigator who now runs a consultancy called Risky Business Solutions. I wonder why he's a former safety employee. I wonder if they laid off a bunch of their safety employees. Spoilers. I'll put a link to this in the description, by the way. We've got a lot of details here about, how Meta's spokespeople are saying, like, this was like an overestimation, blah, 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 like a bunch of kind of PR speak. And I have to say, too, it's not like the 10% number is the only problem with this. As we will see, their own targets for how to fix this are pathetic. So we're just going to skip over this, but I will put a link to this article in the description. You should totally check the whole thing out. It's really, really good reporting by Reuters, and I'm so glad that they did this. So for example, their spokesperson says, over the past 18 months, we have reduced user reports of scam ads globally by 58%, and so far in 2025, we've removed more than 134 million pieces of scam ad content. Well, we just saw that they were showing them 15 billion of them per day. So, boy, yeah, I'm not really sure they should be proud of that, because this is over the course of like 10 months. 10 months, they have removed 134 million pieces of scam ad content, but they also estimated internally that they're showing their users 15 billion scam ads per day. Per day! They removed 1/100th of that many over the course of a year. So, okay, you know what? Let's do this. 10 divided by 12 times 365. So that's about 304 days-ish. So let's call it 305. 305 days it took them to do 135 million of them. But during that time, they were shown 15 billion per day. So good job on your scam ad removal. Also, this reduction in reports by 58% doesn't really say anything, because that could also totally be just people, sort of getting used to the scam ads and just being like, whatever, they never remove them anyway. All right, let's try to keep going. Some of these documents show Meta vowing to do more. Quote, we have large goals to reduce ad scams in 2025, states a 2024 document, with Meta hoping to reduce such ads in certain markets by as much as 50%. Let's convert that from ad speak real quick, because it's really funny. Meta hopes to reduce such ads in certain markets. So they don't really hope to reduce them in all markets. They just hope to reduce them in certain markets, not all of them, by as much as 50%. So no more than 50%. And we'll see later what their actual targets were, because again, it's really, really pathetic. But to convert this from ad speak to regular person speak, Meta is hoping to reduce scams in some places by maybe half, and no more than half. and not in all markets, but in some of them. So good on them. Good on ya, Meta. This is so slimy. All of this is so slimy, dude. At the same time, the documents indicate that Meta's own research suggests that its products have become a pillar of the global fraud economy. A May 2025, that's very recent, note that's just a few months ago, a May 2025 presentation by its safety staff estimated that the company's platforms were involved in a third of all successful scams in the United States. Whoa. Whoa. So that's cool. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people think that scams online mostly happen in like the dark web, like outside of where normal people interact with the internet. But this is showing that the Meta platforms, one of the biggest social media, actually probably the biggest like social media giant, unless you count no, they probably are. They have half the people on the planet on their platforms. This is 33% of successful scams happening through their platforms, in the US at least. That is insane. That is freaking nuts. Meta also acknowledged in other documents that some of its main competitors were doing a better job at weeding out fraud on their platforms. Quote, "It is easier to advertise scams on Meta platforms than Google," concluded an internal Meta review in April 2025 of online communities where fraudsters discuss their trade. The document doesn't lay out the reasons behind that conclusion. And then it goes on to talk about how Meta is already being investigated by the SEC for running financial scam ads. In Britain here, we have a regulator last year said it found that Meta's products were involved in 54% of all payments-related scam losses in 2023, more than double all other social media platforms combined. And you can argue that because this is sort of outside of Meta's, internal documents, that this actually might be more realistic. Like this is an outside observer saying this is what actually happened in 2023. Absolutely staggering numbers here. Like scams are funneled through Meta platforms. It is a fundamental, as they said here, a fundamental pillar or something like that. What did they call it? A pillar of the global fraud economy. Meta platforms, ladies and gentlemen. Here we have some conversation about how Meta is spending $72 billion this year in capital expenditures on AI, but where is that money coming from? Clearly, a lot of it is coming from scam ads. That's interesting. Also, you could clearly use a lot of that money to prevent these future scam ads, but as we'll see, that's sort of not in Meta's own business interest. This has to do with the big overarching issue that maybe we'll talk about if I have the psychological bandwidth to handle it. So here's where we get into some really interesting moral not so gray areas. In the internal documents, Meta weighs out the cost of beefing up its enforcements of scam ads against the toll of financial penalties from governments for failing to protect its users. The documents make clear that Meta aims to reduce its illicit revenue streams in the future, but the company is concerned that abrupt reductions of scam advertising revenue could affect its business projections, according to a 2025, again, very recent, document that discusses the impact of, quote, violating revenue, that is, income from ads that violate Meta's standards, such as scams, illegal gambling, schmexual services, or dubious health products. So again, they are aware that these advertisers are breaking their community guidelines. They call it violating revenue in their own documents. They know that they're violating the community standards of these apps, but they're getting money from them. So you can't really remove them because then you remove the revenue, and that could be bad for the bottom line, which, is true. So they go on in this Reuters report here to say that, quote, "The documents note that Meta plans to try to cut the share of Facebook and Instagram revenue derived from scam ads. In the meantime, Meta has internally acknowledged that regulatory fines for scam ads are certain and anticipates penalties of up to $1 billion, according to one internal document. But those fines would be much smaller than Meta's revenue from scam ads." A separate document from November 2024 states, "Every 6 months, Meta earns $3.5 billion just from the portion of scam ads that, quote, present higher legal risk, unquote, such as those falsely claiming to represent a consumer brand or public figure or demonstrating other signs of deceit. That figure almost certainly exceeds, quote, the cost of any regulatory settlement involving scam ads." So here we have a fundamental issue with attempts to regulate this. Even if Meta was fined $1 billion for clearly, intentionally failing to protect its users, the cost of that fine is going to be so much less then they are going to stand to gain from just continuing to run the scam ads. This is kind of like if you had a parking ticket that was like $25 and you get one of those like maybe every year or so, but the price of parking would have been like $300 a year or whatever. Obviously, for most people, it actually just makes sense to just run the risk of the parking ticket because the cost of actually doing it the legal way would be more costly. So you just take the fine and say, oh, sorry, and then you just keep doing the bad thing. And to sort of spoil the punchline here, this is because Meta wants to profit. And like, that is all that they are trying to do. They are just trying to profit. And as long as it is profitable for them, including if it's illegal, if it is profitable for them to continue running these ads that they know are illegal or that they know violate their own community guidelines, they're going to keep doing it until it's unprofitable for them to keep doing it. So you would have to have some combination of, regulatory fines, or just the government could theoretically just shut them down and say, hey, you're doing like illegal stuff here. 10% of your freaking revenue is from scam ads and you know it and you're running them anyway. The government could shut them down for that. Theoretically, that would obviously hurt their bottom line. But until something drastic like that happens or everyone migrates away from these platforms, which is also not going to happen because they have such a monopoly on social media, like what are you going to do? You're going to go to TikTok. The scams are worse there. So until it is a net loss for them to stop running these ads, they're just going to keep running them as long as they can still make money. Even if they were going to get like a $3 billion fine, if they're making 3.5, they're going to keep doing it because you just made $500 million just continuing to do the thing. So they're going to keep doing it as long as it's profitable because that is their incentive. As Charlie Munger once said, show me the incentive and I will show you the outcome. This is that. This is an incentive causing an outcome. It's literally just that they want profit. And the incentives are not strong enough to prevent them from doing that. The profit incentive is still stronger than the legal incentive, than the social expenditure, obviously, of the reputation. Not that Meta has even like a remotely good reputation at all, but like, that's actually an interesting thing too. If Meta's reputation is already so bad that it can't go lower, they actually also have less of a cost for something like this. Like if Apple did something like this where they were like, showing scams to all their users and getting them scammed and just profiting hugely from it, that would really hurt Apple's reputation because they have an overall pretty good reputation for being a trustworthy company. Or if Microsoft was doing that, that would be really bad for them. But Meta, terrible reputation already. So it really doesn't matter if they get involved in some scam ads or, intentional profiteering off of people's misfortunes. Certainly wouldn't be the first time, would it? Again, all the bad stuff in the comments. Let me know your favorite thing that Meta has done that is heinously immoral in the past. So anyway, the thought process here is clearly that the fines would be smaller than Meta's revenue from the scam ads. So they're just going to keep running the scam ads despite if they're going to be fined or not. It doesn't matter if they're fined or not, they're still making a profit. So they're going to keep doing it. They go on to say, rather than voluntarily agreeing to do more to vet advertisers, the same document states the company's leadership decided to act only in response to impending regulatory action. So basically they're only going to respond to the lawsuits that are actually coming their way. They're not going to actually try to stop doing bad things. They're just going to try to damage control the lawsuits that are coming at them from the bad things they've already done. If you're not getting a lawsuit from something already, there's really no reason to go ahead and stop doing it, At least that is their logic, clearly. I'm not saying that is correct logic, morally speaking, but from a business perspective, I guess it kind of is, which is, again, the problem. Their spokesperson said, that's not our policy. It's what you do, so I think it is your policy. Meta has also placed restrictions on how much revenue it is willing to lose from acting against suspected advertisers, the documents say. In the first half of 2025, a February document states, the team responsible for vetting questionable advertisers wasn't allowed to take actions that could cost Meta more than 0.15% of the company's total revenue. That worked out to a total of 135 million out of the 90 billion that Meta generated in the first half of 2025. So again, we're talking about 10% of their revenue here projected by them. So if you're only allowed to do things about it that would affect 0.15% of your revenue, then at best, you can only address 10% of their revenue coming from that, and then 0.015%, so 0.0015. Okay, so at best, you can address a 66th of the problem, which for the uninitiated is not much of it. What would that be? Oh, you can get rid of 1.5% of the problem. So they were allowed to address 1.5% of the actual problem here. But the other 98.5%, kind of keep that revenue. Quote, let's be cautious, unquote, wrote the manager overseeing the effort, noting that the allowed revenue hit included both scam ads and benign ones that were mistakenly blocked. We have revenue guardrails. And here we finally have some stuff about the man at the top, Mr. Zuckerberg. Amid intensifying pressure to do more to combat scams on Meta's platforms, executives presented Zuckerberg with a plan in October 2024 for what they called a moderate approach to scam enforcement. Instead of a rapid crackdown, the company would focus its efforts on countries where it feared near-term regulatory action, according to a document that outlined the strategy. So their approach was not to actually fix the problem, it was to fix their liability for what they are doing. Do we actually have real near-term, like immediate regulatory risk here? Because if not, it's just not relevant. Let's take a moderate approach here. We don't want to actually fix the problem. We just want to address any of our liability for the problems that we're creating. Innovative. That is certainly an innovative approach. Morally innovative, you might say. Following the meeting with the CEO, Meta executives in charge of enforcing the integrity of the company's platform settled on trying to reduce the percentage of revenue attributable to scams, illegal gambling, and prohibited goods from an estimated 10.1% in 2024 to 7.3% by the end of 2025. So they're really trying to improve here, guys. They only want about 7.3% of their revenue to come from freaking scams. Like, knowingly coming from scams. They want 7.3% of their revenue to knowingly come from scams. That is their goal. That is crazy. Insane! By the end of 2026, Meta aims to further cut that figure to 6% and then to 5.8% in 2027, the strategy memo and other documents show. So by the end of 2027, they are aiming for 5.8% of their revenue to still be from scams, things they know are scams. What? What? Like, am I the only one who's like this shocked? Like, okay, let's take this away from Meta for just a second and sort of get like a little bit of like a different example, like an analogy here. So let's imagine that you're the owner of a massage parlor and all of your masseurs, they are all contractors. So they just rent the rooms in your massage parlor to do their work. And it comes to your attention that 10% of the revenue that you're actually getting from these contract workers is from, shall we say, some illegal types of massages. And all morality aside, that's not legal. But you are aware of it now. You are aware that there is 10% of your money coming from these illegal activities, and you know which massage people are doing it. You are actually aware which massage therapists are actually providing the illegal services. And still, you keep them and you just charge them a little bit more, which we will get into in a second. But I feel like in a situation like that, the obvious legality of like the owner of the massage parlor would be that they are in fact committing a crime. They are at least aiding and abetting knowingly crime. So like, how is that not illegal? How are they not just as liable as the person giving the massage? So to take this back to Meta now, they are knowingly providing a platform for advertisers that they know are scamming people. That's 10% of their revenue is coming from things they know are scams. And they're letting it happen anyway, and they're profiting from it. They are knowingly profiting from crime. But they just can't do anything about it because they just can't make a little less profit. Just imagine how terrible that would be if they only made 90% of the revenue that they made last year. Oh, terrible. Oh, we can't let it happen. So let's see how they get around this, because they sort of do. More innovations to come. So this next section here gives us some examples of this surge in online fraud and how Meta's platforms are being used to perpetrate these frauds upon people. So as an example, in 2022, Meta discovered a 6-figure network. I don't know what they mean by that. 6-figure number of accounts, 6-figure like income, I don't know. Network of accounts pretending to be members of the US military deployed in war zones. The accounts were sending millions of messages a week, trying to charm Facebook users into losing money. And there's also people faking being celebrities or consumer brands. We're going to come back to that in a second, because they're actually very concerned about that. Maybe because these brands or celebrities might sue them, as opposed to regular people who really can't do much against a $1.5 trillion company. We have Meta classifying the scam ads as a quote low severity problem, viewing them as bad quote user experience. And then they have the internal documents showing that Meta directed staffers to focus mainly on fraudsters masquerading as celebrities and usurping major brands. So to put that in regular speak, the people pretending to be either celebrities or brands, the people who might actually end up suing Meta, because that's more liability for Meta there. Focus on the ones that actually have the resources to sue us and win. It says that such, quote, impersonation scams risked upsetting advertisers and public figures, one 2022 document notes, and thus threatened to reduce user engagement and revenue. We cannot let anything affect revenue. And notice again that this is the thought process, right? Like it could negatively actually have a net negative impact on revenue, whereas the scam ads to regular people don't actually negatively affect revenue because the regular people probably aren't going to successfully sue Meta versus the big public figures like, actors, celebrities, whatever, them getting pissed at Meta for a bunch of impersonation things. That might actually have a negative impact. If advertisers don't feel safe advertising on Meta, which I would argue they shouldn't, then that could actually have a meaningful impact on Meta's bottom line. Because if brands can't trust that Meta is going to not let their brand be infringed upon, then that actually dissuades advertisers from wanting to advertise on Meta platforms. And this is the kind of thing you saw with like X, for example, when Elon Musk took over Twitter. Twitter's advertising revenue dropped precipitously because advertisers just did not want to be next to all the stuff that, was on X and is still on X. It's a brand liability. That could actually affect Meta's bottom line, and therefore they are actually trying to address those problems, but not the regular people like you and me. It's just not profitable to focus on that. Like, it's not worth it for them to spend any money mitigating that risk if they're not actually facing any commensurate negative profit outcome from it happening. In fact, they're making a lot of money on these scam ads. So they only want to get rid of the ones that they actually need to, because otherwise they're just getting rid of revenue for no reason other than, morality. But that is beside the point. It's like on another planet than the point. Oh gosh, let's just get through the rest of this article, man, and then I'll give you some more opinions. We might need to go for a walk after this. Honestly, I feel like I need to see some sunlight. We might go for a walk after this. Let's get through this article and then I'll give you some more of my opinions on it. All right, so then it talks about how layoffs at Meta were infecting enforcement. The planning document for the first half of 2023 notes that everyone who worked on the team handling advertiser concerns about brand rights issues had been laid off. So I guess it's no one's job at this $1.5 trillion company to actually handle these concerns, which is interesting. The company was also devoting resources so heavily to virtual reality and AI that safety staffers were ordered to restrict their use of Meta's computing resources. They were instructed to merely, quote, keep the lights on. All right, and here we get to one that I think is absolutely insane. Like, this is absolutely crazy. Meta also was ignoring the vast majority of user reports of scams. A document from 2023 indicates by that year, safety staffers estimated that Facebook and Instagram users each week were filing about 100,000 valid reports of fraudsters messaging them, but Meta ignored or incorrectly rejected 96% of them. Again, this is from Meta's own internal documents. They know that they were ignoring or incorrectly rejecting 96% of correct fraud reports on their platforms from, users like you and me. And I actually had an instance of this recently. I reported an account that was impersonating Brew Markets. They're the morning brew people, but specifically like a markets account. I had an account follow me that was clearly not Brew Markets. It had like 2 S's on the end or something. It was rejected by Meta. They said that they reviewed the account and said that it does not violate their community guidelines. So I was like, well, I guess this is just like TikTok then. They don't actually remove stuff, which was true up until a few days ago, around the time that this stuff was coming out, where suddenly it was taken down. They said, oh, we reviewed your thing and we found that this does in fact violate our community standards. So I wonder what changed. But just like everything else in this document, it gets worse. Quote, Meta's safety staff resolved to do better. In the future, the company hoped to dismiss no more than 75% of valid scam reports. Holy crap! They know that they're doing this and they're still going to reject 3/4 of valid scam reports. That is their goal. Their goal is to still reject 3/4 of valid scam reports by users. Like, yes, that's an improvement from 96%, which is an absolutely staggeringly stupid number, but 75% of valid reports is what they're intending to reject. That is their goal. What the heck, dude? What the heck? Aaron West, a former Santa Clara County prosecutor who now runs a nonprofit devoted to combating scams, said Meta's default response to users flagging fraud was to ignore them. And based on this number up here from Meta's own self, seems accurate. She says she doesn't know if she's ever seen something taken down as a result of a single user report. And last October, a recruiter, oh yeah, this is a really sad story. Again, you should just go read this article. I don't just want to give you the whole article. I don't want to take credit for Reuters' work here because they did a really good job. But there's this whole thing about how someone was impersonated and then like sold a bunch of crypto scams, and dozens of different people were reporting this thing before they actually got rid of it. It's absolutely crazy. They even got the police involved here, the Canadian police, and they still didn't even respond. Meta still did not even respond to the police reaching out to them about this scam. This thing went on for a month. She's got people calling her, telling them that they got scammed because they thought it was her. Just really sad stuff. And again, Meta is making tons and tons of money from all of these scam ads, but they're not actually helping the people who got scammed at all. You could easily compensate all these people who got defrauded with the money, the billions of dollars. We need to emphasize that. They're making billions of dollars off of scams. And they're not actually helping any of the people who got scammed from the things that they knew were scams. They know that these are scams, and they know that they're not even removing them when people ask. When people correctly identify and report these scams, they're still not removing them 96% of the time. And they're aiming to only remove them 25% of the time. What the heck, dude? Like, how is this happening in today's society? Like, am I crazy? Also, let me know in the comments, please. Am I crazy, or is this just totally normal? And you know, like I don't know what's happening anymore. Like, this is so insane. Anyway, they said dozens of people reported it multiple times each. Meta received more than 100 reports about this situation, and by the time they finally took down or hacked account, at least 4 other military colleagues have been defrauded. Just crazy, man. And apparently all this money ended up in like Nigeria somewhere, so they couldn't actually even get the money back, even if they could trace it to the source. Meta declined to comment on the Air Force recruiter's hacked account or its victims. No comment on that. We don't have anything to say. No, nothing to say on that whatsoever. Not even that's terrible or something like that. No, just don't have anything to say about that. No comment. Now we have a little section about how Meta polices fraud. So far, we've only talked about ones that are through ads, right? Scams on Facebook, Instagram, whatever, that are through paid ads. But there are also plenty of what they call organic scams that aren't paid for, but they're still run through Facebook or through Instagram or through WhatsApp, whatever. So these are called organic scams. Organic scams include fraudulent classified ads placed for free on Facebook Marketplace, hoax dating profiles, and charlatans touting phony cures in cancer treatment groups. Holy crap. So bad. According to a December 2024 presentation, Meta's user base is exposed to 22 billion organic scam attempts every day. That's on top of the 15 billion scam ads presented to users daily. So just things you see in your feed every single day. And then there's also 15 billion scam ads presented to users every day. So we've got here at, to use the YouTube term impressions, how many times people are actually seeing a thing. You're getting about 37 billion scams being shown to Meta's users every single day. That is absolutely staggering to me. That is unfathomable. Guys, there are only 8 billion people on the freaking planet. So even if Meta had an account for every single human being on the planet, you would still have something like, what is that number? 4.5 scams per day being shown to every single human being. So there, on Meta, every single day, there are about 4.5 scams shown to people for every human being on the planet. It also says that Meta polices fraud in a way that fails to capture much of the scam activity on its platforms. For example, there was a Singaporean thing after police in Singapore gave the company a list of 146 examples of scams targeting that country's users. Meta staff found that only 23% actually violated the platform's policies. The other 77%, quote, violate the spirit of the policy, but not the letter. The deceptive marketing flagged by Singaporean police that Meta didn't act on included, quote, too good to be true offers of 80% off a designer fashion brand, promotions for fake concert tickets, and job ads posted by entities falsely claiming to be major tech companies. So you actually would think that they would give this more attention because they don't want to anger other tech companies. Or actually, maybe they're fine with that because that's their competition. Other Meta safety staffers also document instances in which the company's rules on scams didn't appear to cover obviously bad behavior. In April, staffers noted that they discovered $250,000 in scam crypto ads from an account claiming to belong to Canada's Prime Minister. Minister. Current policies would not flag this account, an internal document says. Meta's Stone, that's their representative, said the ads were removed for other reasons, which doesn't seem better. Why were they not removed for that reason? You're impersonating a prime minister to sell crypto. What the heck? And they made $250,000 from that. They kept the money. At least I think they kept the money. I'm not aware of, any measures that Meta has taken to actually try to give the money back to any of these people. I think they would probably, based on their previous policies that we've read here, only do that if they were actually being sued and being compelled to give money away. The Prime Minister's office did not reply to a request for comment. Here we have this story. I'll just skip over this, but just to summarize it, there was an employee at Meta who was actually creating this weekly Scammiest Scammers list, and a check by Reuters of the 5 accounts cited in one Scammiest Scammers report found that 2 were still live more than 6 months later. So even when an internal employee at Meta is saying, hey, this is the scammiest scammer on our platform, you still don't remove it in 6 months? The worst of the worst is not being removed. Some of the worst, at least. Colleagues praise this initiative. I bet they did. This person deserves credit. I don't know why their name isn't anywhere, but maybe they didn't want it to be. All right, so now we come to the last thing that we're gonna talk about here, sort of the last effort of Meta to do anything about this. As you'll see, it's quite innovative because it allows them to keep running scam ads and pretend like they're doing something about them and actually reduce the number of the scam ads a little bit without actually affecting their bottom line. From the Reuters article here, the company last year developed a novel approach to reduce scam advertising and keep its enforcement costs low. It began charging suspected fraudsters more. To advertise on Meta's platforms, a business has to compete in an online auction. Before the bidding, the company's automated systems calculate the odds that the advertiser is engaged in fraud. Under Meta's new policy, likely scammers who fall below Meta's threshold for removal would have to pay more to win an auction. Documents from last summer called such, quote, penalty bids a centerpiece of Meta's efforts to reduce scams. Marketers suspected of committing fraud would have to pay Meta more to win ad auctions, thus impacting their profits from the scams and reducing the number of users exposed to their ads, notably impacting profits of the scammers, but not, and this is the innovation, not greatly affecting the profits of Meta itself from these scam ads, which they, again, know are probably scam ads, but they're going to show them to you anyway. For Meta, the financial impact was mixed. While the company would sell fewer scam ads, oh, shucks, it would make more money from those that it did, offsetting some of that lost revenue. Oh, good. I was worried about our revenue. And Meta's representative said that the goal of the effort was to reduce overall scam advertising by making suspicious advertisers less competitive in Meta's ad auctions, as opposed, again, to just removing the suspicious advertisers, which it could also do, but it does not want to do because that would affect revenue too much. Here at Meta, we need that scam revenue. We just don't make enough money from legal purposes. We've got to advertise scams to our users to the tune of tens of billions of times a day. That's the only way we're gonna stay afloat as our $1.6 trillion company that we are. In the months following the implementation of the penalty bid program, Stone said, that's their representative again, testing showed both a decline in scam reports and a slight decline in overall ad revenue. So what do you think? We've reached the end of the article here. Maybe we just go for a walk. We've got a lot of things weighing upon our brains right now, but I still haven't really told you most of what I think about this, believe it or not. So let's go for a walk and try to calm down and sort of try to digest what this means about our society that we've got here and maybe how to fix it in the future. If we can. We'll see. Let's go for a walk. See, now, here's the issue, friends. First of all, I still am not wearing pants. I'm wearing shorts and it's like 50 degrees out here. That's the first problem. The second problem is all of this is based in profit, right? Like all that our companies aim to do is make profit. And specifically, they aim to make profits for the investors in that company. Specifically, no other company, no other people, no other entities whatsoever. They aim to make profits for the investors of that company. That is their only purpose. I've in the past made videos debunking, for example, the Ben Jordan video talking about why capitalism is dying or whatever. I don't think it is. That doesn't mean that I like capitalism though, and in fact I have a lot of negative things to say about it. But fundamentally, the biggest issue I think with capitalism in general is just that it purely looks for this profit motive, like only profit, market value-driven profit. So when you have a situation where a company can make money doing something bad for people, it's going to do that as long as it's profitable, as long as the negative impact of them doing that negative thing doesn't outweigh the profit they can make. And in this case, it definitely does not. If you took the value of all of this revenue that Meta is getting from scam ads, that it would make them one of the biggest companies in the world. It's 10% of their revenue, right? So usually stock prices are based on future expected revenue, not current revenue. But let's just imagine for a second that it's current revenue. That would make Meta's scam ads business a roughly $160 billion company. That is an enormous enterprise that is dedicated to what they know is just scams. If you had any other business that was like 10% crime, 10% things that are actually illegal, I feel like you would do something about that. I feel like you would hold people accountable. And especially if you had CEOs like Mark who were apparently aware of this issue and choosing not to do anything about it because they just want the profit more. You would do something about that. You would hold them criminally accountable. So I hope that's what happens here, but sincerely, I really doubt it will be. That's very unfortunate, obviously. So make a ruckus about this. I think that people need to be talking about this. I think people need to know 10% of Meta's revenue is coming from things that are illegal. Like, again, Meta has done so many things in the past that have been super messed up, super bad for humanity, super bad for society, arguably illegal types of things. It has to stop somewhere. They cannot keep doing terrible things and getting away with it. Knowingly doing terrible things and getting away with it. The issue is that we are not profiting for the many here. We're just profiting for the few, profiting for Meta investors here. We're not profiting for anybody else. This could be bad for literally everyone else, and they would still do it because their mission is just to maximize shareholder value. And this was covered very, very well in a collaborative video that I did with Britt from Art of the Problem. So this video will be on the end screen. Please do give it a watch if you want to sort of think about the theory of this a little bit more. If you want to think about how companies could actually be good, they could theoretically be good in their chasing of profit. They just often aren't because they're just profiting for themselves, for the company, and not for society as a whole. Profit and the goal of profit is not the issue here. It's just profit for too few people. So anyway, there's a lot to be said here about capitalism, about Meta, about the legality of things, about crime happening in plain sight and people knowing that it's happening and not getting, caught for it. There's just so much to talk about here. I would probably run out of breath. My vocal cords would disintegrate before I actually talked it all out. So please do talk it all out in the comments. Let me know your personal favorite terrible things that Meta has done in the past and completely gotten away with. I'll see you down in those comments, and I will also see you in the next one. Bye.